Chapter 1. The night the forest cried, the night was colder than death itself. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes even your heartbeat sound hollow. I remember the wind whispering through the trees, carrying a strange scent. Fear. Blood. And something heartbreakingly pure. I was just gathering herbs near the old riverbank when I heard it. A faint whimper. Small. Broken. Desperate. At first I thought it was a wounded animal. But then I heard another. And another. Tiny cries overlapping in pain and loneliness. My lantern trembled in my hands as I followed the sound, deeper into the fog-wrapped woods. And there, beneath an ancient willow, I saw them. 2 small wolf pups, their fur matted with mud, shivering against the roots. Their eyes glowed faintly gold even in the darkness, a sign of royal blood. Alpha blood. My heart stopped. What were royal wolf pups doing here, alone? Then I saw it. A faint trail of blood leading away from them, deep into the shadows. I followed it only a few steps before the metallic scent made me gag. There, tangled in the bushes, was a torn piece of fabric, pure white silk, soaked in crimson. Aluna's robe, the royal crest embroidered at the edge. My hands trembled. I knew what this meant. Someone had abandoned the Alpha's heirs. Someone who should have protected them with her life. The pups whimpered again, and I dropped to my knees beside them. One tried to crawl toward me, but its little paw was bleeding. The other pressed its face into its sibling's fur, crying softly. "Oh, you poor things." My voice broke as I scooped them up in my cloak. Their bodies were so light, so fragile, I could feel their hearts fluttering against my skin. "Don't worry. I've got you." The forest around me seemed to sigh. A warning, maybe. Because even then, I could feel eyes watching me. The woods belonged to him, the Alpha King, and trespassing near his border, especially carrying his bloodline in your arms, was the same as signing your death. But I didn't care. All I could think about was how they trembled when I touched them, how cold they were, how no creature, not even royal wolves, deserved to die alone in the dark. By the time I reached my cabin, the moon was high and silver. I wrapped the pups in blankets, warmed some milk, and tried not to think about the blood-stained crest still burning in my pocket. Days passed. The pups grew stronger. I named them Ash and Ember, the names of things that survived the fire. They followed me everywhere, tiny paws patting behind me as I worked. Sometimes I'd look into their golden eyes and feel an ache in my chest, a strange pull, like fate itself was watching. Then one night, the earth trembled. A howl split the silence. Long, furious, echoing through the valley like thunder. The pups whimpered, pressing into me as if they knew that voice. My heart slammed in my chest. I stepped outside, and there he was, standing at the edge of the woods like a shadow carved from moonlight and wrath. The Alpha King. Tall, merciless. His eyes glowed gold, the same burning fire that lived in the pup's gaze. His presence was suffocating. The air around him seemed to crackle, and his wolf aura wrapped the night in danger. For a moment he didn't move. Just watched me, watched them, and I felt it. That instinctual, primal fear that makes your pulse stutter and your breath catch. His voice was a growl wrapped in thunder. "You have my blood in your hands." I froze. He took a step forward, and I could feel the ground tremble beneath his boots. The pups whimpered again, trying to crawl toward him, but I held them close, my heart racing. "I saved them," I shouted, voice shaking. "They were left to die. Your Luna, don't say her name." His voice dropped lower, darker, filled with something between grief and fury. "You think I don't know what she did?" His gaze shifted from me to the pups, softening for a fleeting second before turning sharp again. "You entered my land. You touched what's mine. Tell me, do you value your life that little?" The air was thick, suffocating. My hands trembled, but I refused to bow my head. If saving them means my death, then so be it, but I will not regret it. Something flickered in his eyes, something raw, dangerous. He stepped closer until his shadow swallowed mine, his voice dropping to a whisper that still cut like steel. "Why?" he asked. "Why would a human risk her life for wolves that aren't hers?" I met his gaze and whispered, "Because no one should be abandoned, not even your pups." For a long moment, there was silence. Only the wind and the sound of the pups' soft breathing. Then the Alpha King took a slow breath and exhaled. His eyes, once burning with rage, softened into something I couldn't name. He looked at me like he was seeing something he hadn't expected. Something dangerous, something fated. "You shouldn't have done that," he murmured. "Because now, little human, you've tangled yourself in my curse." A shiver ran down my spine as he turned away, his voice carrying through the night like a warning and a promise. "Keep them safe until I return. And when I do, I'll decide what to do with you." And just like that, he vanished into the darkness, leaving me standing under the weeping willow, holding his heirs in my arms, and the weight of a fate I didn't yet understand. That night I didn't sleep. The forest was too still, the air too heavy. I felt something shifting, something ancient, as if the moon itself had just marked me. And deep inside, my heart whispered a truth I wasn't ready to hear. The Alpha King wasn't just coming back for his pups. He was coming back for me. Chapter 2. The King's Shadow. At my door dawn came like a muted bruise, violet and gray smudged across the sky. The forest held its breath. Even the birds refused to sing. Ash and Ember slept tucked beneath my cloak where I'd laid it near the hearth, their tiny bodies pressed together, their breaths soft and even. I kept the fire low so its crackle wouldn't frighten them, or drown out anything that might move beyond my door. I didn't bathe. I didn't brew tea. I didn't even braid my hair the way I always did before the sun lifted fully. I just stood with my palm against the rough wood of the door, listening to the hush that wasn't peace. It was expectation. The world felt like a bowstring pulled too tight. He said he would return. All night, those words marched through me like soldiers. Keep them safe until I return. And when I do, I'll decide what to do with you. Decide. As if my life were a coin he could pocket, a blade he could sheathe, or break. I knelt at the hearth and checked Ash's paw. The cut had closed into a thin red line. Ember's little belly rose and fell, as if he were counting the seconds with me. I ran a finger over their ears, and a warmth that wasn't mine moved along my skin. A hum. A gilded thread pulling toward the woods where I knew he was. The Alpha King. The name itself had weight. Stories clung to him like ice on a spear. They said he was born with a storm in his ribs. They said his first shift cracked the stones of his mother's hall, and that no blade would ever drink his blood without paying in lightning. They said his Luna was a rose made of frost, fragile to the eye, but with thorns that would drink you dry. They didn't say she would abandon her pups. A rustle outside. A scent. Pine, rain, steel. I reached for the knife I kept wedged between the bricks by the stove. The handle was worn to the shape of my palm. I stood quietly and slid it into my sleeve. Then I padded to the window, lifting the edge of the curtain just enough to peer through. Not him. A man in a dark cloak stood at the edge of the clearing, half shadowed by birch trunks. He didn't move like a human. Too still. Too sure. The air around him twitched with wolf blood. He raised his head and breathed in as if smelling the house itself, then stepped forward. The pups stirred with a soft whine. I unlatched the door before he could knock. He took one look at the knife glinting in my sleeve, and faint amusement flickered over his mouth. An expression that didn't fit his scarred face. "You're braver than you look," he said. "Or more foolish," I answered. He dipped his chin once, a curt greeting. "I am the King's beta, of course. The second shadow of a tyrant moon. What do you want?" I asked, though I already knew. Every nerve in my body knew. "To see the children," he said. "And to see you." "Me?" The beta's eyes slid past my shoulder toward the hearth. "He scented you on them. He scented them on you. That is enough to mark this place, and whatever lives inside it." I didn't step aside. I didn't invite him in, but I didn't shut the door either. What if I say no? He raised his hands, palms open. Not a threat, a lesson. If you say no, the king will still come. He will still enter. He will still see. but you will have earned the wrong part of his attention. A shiver climbed my spine. I moved. The beta stepped into my cabin and paused, head tilted lightly, as if listening to its heart. Then his hard gaze softened a fraction, the smallest fraction, at the sight of ash and ember. He went to one knee by the fire and extended a hand. Ember blinked up, drowsy, sniffed those scar-lined fingers, and pressed his tiny nose against them like a pledge. Ash tilted his head, considered. "They are strong," he murmured. "You fed them. You kept them warm. You wrapped them in your scent. Was I supposed to leave them in the dirt because your Luna did?" The beta lifted his eyes. "Watch your tongue. That title still carries teeth." "Then perhaps it should have guarded its own," I said, and surprised myself with the steel in my voice. They would be bones by now if I hadn't found them. We watched each other. Somewhere in the woods a raven called, a scrape of sound over the morning. At last he gave a short nod. "You did well. That is why you are alive." His attention cut to a small shape on the table near the window. A square of cloth I should have burned last night and didn't. White silk, washed but never clean again, royal crest splashed with rusty shadows that light couldn't erase. The beta's jaw tightened. "Where?" "By the willow," I said. "Near the border stones. I found the pups there." He touched the silk only with 2 fingers, like it might make a mark on him that no water could lift. His voice thinned. "Do you know what that crest means?" "I know it means she meant them to die." His eyes flashed like a blade reflecting sun. "No. It means the person who wore it cannot be allowed to live with that crest still her right. A doom disguised as duty. A sentence hidden in a symbol," I swallowed. "Is he going to kill her?" The beta didn't answer. He set the cloth back where it had lain, as precisely as if that small precision mattered. Then he stood. "He approaches," he said simply. "You will feel it." I already did. It began as a tremor through the floor, the kind that might have come from a distant cart but didn't. The kind of tremor that moves inside your bones before any surface shakes. The hearthlight bent toward the door. The little copper kettle on the back of the stove gave a single crisp click, like a clock refusing the hour. The world leaned. I heard him before I saw him. A low roll of a sound that wasn't quite a growl, and wasn't wind either. A declaration that the forest understood. My heart leapt hard enough to bruise my ribs. The beta took a step back from the pups, bowed his head, and turned toward the doorway. The latch lifted. The door opened. Cold air swept in, and with it, pine, thunder, a darkness that tasted like iron and rain. He filled the threshold. His hair was wet with mist. His throat bore a thin, pale scar I hadn't seen last night, a mark like a crescent blade had kissed and failed to keep. His eyes were not simply gold. They were that and more, molten, unnatural, lit from within by something older than crowns. The king. The room shrank. The fire seemed to hush itself. I felt a pull. Not forward, not backward. Inward. A string that wasn't mine threaded through my lungs and tied to some other chest entirely. It tightened with each breath he took. He stepped in. He didn't look at me first. He went to them. Ash lifted his head and made a sound I'd never heard from him. Not a cry, not a yip. A call. Ember scrambled forward, paws sliding on the woven mat, little body shivering with such relief that my eyes stung. The Alpha knelt, all his edges gentled at once. Not gone. Never gone, but turned inward like a blade sheathed in velvet. He held out his hands, and the pups crawled onto them without hesitation, whining, licking, sobbing in tiny canine gasps that softened into woofs. He pressed his forehead to theirs, a ritual, old as wolves, and something in the air changed. A circuit closed, a constellation finished. "Forgive me," he whispered to them, so low I almost missed it. "Forgive me for trusting Frost with fire." His voice made my throat ache. He straightened slowly, set the pups back upon the blanket, and only then did he turn fully toward me. I didn't move. My knife hilt warmed against my wrist as if it had blood. His gaze caught mine and held it. The pole inside me cinched, he inhaled, The tiniest muscle in his jaw jumped. "You smell like safety," he said, as if the word surprised him. Heat rushed to my face, not from shyness, but from the audacity of survival. "I smell like smoke and milk and fear," I answered. "Safety is a story I tell them when the night is too loud." His eyes flickered to the beta. "Leave us." The beta bent. "Majesty." He moved to the door without sound, closed it behind him without a click, and we were alone with the small sound of pups and the louder sound of hearts neither of us were willing to acknowledge. The king didn't stride or loom now. He simply stood, a weight, a promise, a warning. I watched his fingers slowly uncurl and curl again at his sides, like someone flexing after a long hold. "You defied law to keep them alive," he said. "You entered royal ground. You handled royal heirs. You spoke of my Luna with truth that tastes like insult. You should be on your knees begging not to bleed." He paused. The next words scraped out tender and terrible. "And yet I don't want you to bend." My breath snagged. "Then decide," I said. "Is this where you break me for kindness, or is this where you thank me for the same?" He looked toward the hearth, at the kettle, at the cup I had not filled, and back at me, as if all the little nothings of this morning told him more about me than any confession. When he spoke again, his voice had softened in the middle and hardened at the edges. "I have a curse," he said. "It braided itself into me the night I was crowned. It takes what I hold too close. It punishes my desire with ruin." His gaze touched the pups like a vow that he would not fail twice. "It returned to me like thunder after lighting. I should keep my distance from anything I want." Want. The word landed between us like a thrown ring, a circle that could keep or capture. I didn't ask for anything. "I managed. Neither did they," he answered. "And here we are." He took one step. The floor didn't creak, but the air reacted, cool against my lips. "Tell me your name." "Why?" My voice was barely voice. "Because I've already tasted it on my tongue, and I need to know if my mouth has lied to me." "Lyria," I said before my caution could stop me. "My name is Lyria." Something in him flinched, quick and private, as if the syllables found a door he'd been leaning against and opened it. "Lyria," he repeated, softer than I'd thought his throat could be. "You have put a thing into my keeping that I cannot repay with coin, so I will repay it with law." His attention slashed to the silk on the table, to the crest that had twisted the morning into a decree. "The Luna will be tried. There will be no stones for her to hide under, no halls to close their doors. This kingdom will learn what a mother's oath costs when it is broken." I swallowed, and the taste of iron lifted to the back of my tongue. "If she is still your Luna, then I—" He cut the air, and my words with it. She was my Luna. The past lay heavy in that single verb. Do not kneel to a title that no longer wears its crown. I drew a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The pups tumbled against his boot, playing with the leather laces as if there were no trials, no crests, no curses, only the certainty of a father's shadow where they could sleep again. He looked down at them, and then up at me with the decision moving under his skin like a wave under ice. "You kept them alive," he said. "You took their fear into your lungs and breathed back warmth. If wolves still wrote laws in bark and bone, there would be a word for that. Since we write them on paper now, I will make one." He took another step, close enough that I could see a fleck of pale silver in his left iris, a star frozen in gold. "Hear me," he said, and though his voice didn't rise, the room bowed anyway. "From this morning until I say otherwise, you are under my protection. You will not be touched by claw or court. You will not be fined, jailed, tried, or banished for what you did. The only one allowed to decide what to do with you is me." That last sentence should have felt like a chain. Instead, something in it loosened. Not freedom, not yet, but a reprieve with teeth that faced outward. "What if your otherwise comes too soon?" I asked, defiance trembling like a string drawn past wisdom. His mouth almost curved. "Then try to make me delay it." Ash yawned so wide I could see the pink roof of his mouth. Ember nuzzled my ankle like a blessing. The Alpha reached toward me, then stopped, his hand hanging between a command and a comfort. "I will send patrols," he said, letting the hand fall. "There will be threats you do not know the names for yet. The scent of Luna blood abandoned will stir beasts we do not invite. Rogues? I asked. Worse, he said. Men who sold their wolves for coin. And those who serve a queen with no crown but the one she carves into the hearts of the weak. His gaze went winter hard. If any come here, you will not open this door to them. Do you understand me, Lyria? I understand. And if I come, he added softer, you will. My throat tightened for reasons I refused to inventory. If you come, I said, you won't need doors. For a second, the storm beneath his ribs eased. He looked like a man who had been looking too long at horizons and had finally found a hearth. Then he straightened, set his shoulders, and the king swallowed the man again. He turned to go. Wait, I said before sense could catch the word. He paused. Last night, you said I'd tangled myself in your curse. I did. Is that why the air hurts when you leave? The question leapt out of me raw, unadorned, as if my lungs had been waiting their turn to speak. Is that why the room stops when you arrive and rushes when you step back? He looked at the door, at the hinge, at the seam of wood and frame, and then back at me with a stare that felt like a vow breathing. When he spoke, it was barely more than the truth slipping through a crack. It might be a curse, he said, but it feels like an answer I'm afraid to read. To what question? He gave me my own name in a whisper that wasn't quite a prayer and wasn't quite a warning, to whether the moon has finally decided to be kind to me. The latch lifted beneath his hand. Cold breathed in again. He stepped across the threshold, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, then glanced over his shoulder like a man choosing where to die in a battle that hadn't begun. Prepare yourself, he said. Today the kingdom will start to scream. When they do, they will scream for a witch, a thief, a seductress, a traitor. They will use every name a woman can be stoned with. When they say those names, remember the only one I gave you. What name is that? I asked, though I already knew and didn't dare know. His eyes burned gold and terrible and tender. Mine. The door closed. The room exhaled. Outside, in the pale blur of morning, hooves hammered and voices rose. Distant, organized, gathering like stormfront. The world had heard the first rumor, then the second, then the 100th. I stood in my kitchen with firelight on my skin, and the taste of pine and thunder still in my mouth, and felt the thread inside me hum like a live wire. Ash and ember climbed my skirts until I picked them up. I pressed my cheek to their soft heads and stared at the white silk on the table, at the crest that had turned love into law, law into sentence, sentence into this moment. Somewhere in the forest, a horn sounded, 3 long notes, a pause, 1 short. A warning pattern I'd only heard once before when a hunting party came back with fewer shadows than it carried out. The beta had been right. I would feel it. I felt it now. A different presence pushing at the edges of the clearing. Not royal, not clean, a smell like old iron and hunger. The kind of scent that says, we sold the part of us that could be tamed. I set the pups into their basket and moved to the door. I slid the knife from my sleeve and laid it on the table beside the silk. Then I picked up the iron poker from the hearth and weighed it in my hand. Not elegant, not silver, but heavy enough to matter. My pulse steadied. The fire crouched, ready. If the king's curse wanted to ruin what he reached for, it would have to come through me to do it. And I had learned in one night that I do not break like glass. I break like stone, once, with a sound that echoes forever. Feet scuffed outside. A hand tested the latch. A voice, oily and bright, tried to pretend it knew me. Mistress, we heard a rumor you took in strays. We've come to help. I smiled without softness and lifted the poker. Come then, I whispered to the door. Let me decide what to do with you. And somewhere far off, like a promise wrapped in thunder, a howl rolled across the morning, the kind of sound that makes rogues forget their lies and remember they used to fear something. The king was not near, but his name was, and it was already working. Chapter 3. Blood on the threshold. The first blow against the door was not a knock. It was a warning. Wood groaned, dust rained from the ceiling, and the pups whimpered. The iron poker trembled in my hand as another strike followed, louder, sharper, splintering the edges of the frame. I backed away slowly, eyes fixed on the latch. Shadows crawled under the crack of the door like spilled ink. Whoever stood outside wasn't there to talk. "Stay quiet," I whispered to the pups, my voice shaking. They pressed deeper into the basket, their golden eyes wide with fear. Then a voice, smooth and venomous. "Open up, witch! By royal order, the Luna's crest has been seen in your possession. You will surrender it, or burn with it." My heart dropped. They had found me already. The kingdom moved faster than rumors. I tightened my grip on the poker. "You have no right here," I shouted back. "This land belongs to no one." A cruel laugh answered me. "No one? It belongs to the king, little liar, and he's not here to save you." Before I could speak again, the door exploded inward. Splinters flew like daggers. I stumbled back as 3 figures entered, cloaked in black leather, blades glinting red in the dim firelight. Rogues. But not just any rogues. Deserters who once bore royal marks. I saw the scars burned into their necks. Where the sigil of loyalty had been cut away, the seed, one in front, a man with gray, eyes and a scar running through his mouth, smiled as if he'd found a ghost he'd been paid to kill. "Well, what do we have here?" he drawled. A human pretending to be a savior. The king's little pet. "I saved children," I snapped. "If that's a crime, then maybe your kingdom is worse than your queen." His grin faltered. "Watch that tongue." He lifted his blade, jagged, cruel, and pointed toward the pups. "Heard you're keeping royal blood under your roof. Hand them over." "Never." The word was out before I could stop it, trembling with defiance. The man sighed. "Then bleed for them." He lunged. I swung the poker, catching him across the face. The sound of metal against bone filled the room. He stumbled back, cursing, but another came from behind, grabbing my arm, twisting. Pain shot through my wrist. The poker clattered to the floor. The pups cried out, a sharp, panicked sound that made the men flinch. "Shut them up," one snarled. The scarred man recovered, wiping blood from his cheek. "No, let them scream. The king's going to smell their fear before he smells their blood." My heart hammered. They were going to kill them, and me. I reached for the table, my fingers brushing the knife I'd left there. The same one I'd used to cut herbs and save lives, now trembling for another purpose. But before I could move, a low rumble filled the air. The floor shook. The windows rattled. And then, silence. Every man froze. The pups stopped crying. Even the fire held its breath. A shadow stretched across the broken doorway. Tall, vast, alive. The air changed, thickened, pulsing with power. The rogues turned slowly. Their bravado drained in an instant, because standing in that shattered doorway was death itself. The Alpha King. His eyes glowed like molten gold, his aura flooding the cabin with pressure so heavy the walls seemed to bend. He didn't roar. He didn't speak. He just looked. The rogue leader dropped to one knee, not in respect, but in fear. Majesty, we were only—" "Finish that sentence," the king said softly, and every candle in the room flickered. The rogue's lips quivered. No sound came. The king stepped inside. "You broke my law. You crossed my scent. You touched them." He pointed to the pups, who whimpered but didn't hide, and for that, he moved faster than wind. One moment he was across the room. The next, his hand was wrapped around the rogue's throat. The man gasped, feet kicking as the king lifted him with terrifying ease. "You should have stayed dead the first time you betrayed me," the Alpha growled. His claws extended, dark, glinting like obsidian. "Please." The king's eyes flashed. "Do not beg me for mercy you never offered to children." He squeezed. The sound that followed was not human. The sharp, wet crack of bone and silence after. The body fell, limp. The other 2 rogues tried to flee, but the king was faster. 1 slash, 2, and they were nothing but shadows on the floor. When it was over, the cabin was still again, except for my trembling breaths and the pup's soft whines. The king's chest rose and fell heavily, his hands dripping crimson. He looked like a god carved from vengeance. Then, slowly, he turned toward me. His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something flicker there. Not rage, not power, something raw, something human, He took a step closer. I backed away until my spine hit the wall. The knife was still in my hand, though we both knew it wouldn't matter if he decided I was next. "You're shaking," he said, voice low, almost guilty. "They tried to kill me," I whispered. "They tried to take your pups." His gaze softened. "And you fought them." I didn't have a choice. He tilted his head. "You always have a choice. You could have run." I shook my head. "Not while they were here. They trust me. I couldn't leave them." Something broke in his expression. A crack in the mask of the monster they called King. He took another step, closing the space between us. "You keep defying death as if you don't understand who calls it." "I understand perfectly," I whispered. "But I don't fear it, not when it comes for something innocent." The silence that followed was deafening. The world outside felt far away, like we were trapped in a moment that wasn't supposed to exist. Then, his hand rose, slowly, and he brushed a strand of hair from my face. His touch was cold, yet fire spread where his fingers lingered. "Every time I see you," he murmured, "this curse claws tighter. I should hate you for that." "Then hate me," I said, though my voice trembled. He gave a faint, broken smile. "If I could, I would." He turned away, looking down at the pups. Ash crawled to his boot, nuzzling him with a soft sound. The king knelt, stroking the small head with tenderness that didn't fit his legend. "They shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "The kingdom will hunt them until nothing remains." "Then let them stay hidden here," I said. "With me," he looked up sharply. "You'd risk that again? Even after this?" "Yes." For a long moment he said nothing, just stared, like he was trying to see something inside me the world had already forgotten. Then his jaw tightened. "You don't even realize what you've done, do you?" he whispered. "What? You've made me care again." The words hit harder than any threat could have. He stood, stepping back into the doorway, his silhouette framed by the dying firelight. "The kingdom will move against me," he said. "My Luna's betrayal has awakened a war within the pack. But remember this, Lyria. If they come for you again, they won't find a savior. They'll find a storm." He turned, cloak sweeping like shadow. But before he left, he paused. "I told you before," he said without looking back. "You tangled yourself in my curse. Now, you've become the only thing holding it together." And then he was gone, leaving behind blood, silence, and the faint scent of pine and lightning. I sank to the floor, knife slipping from my hand. The pups crawled into my lap, warm and alive. I held them close, my heart still echoing his words. Outside, thunder rolled again, distant, but growing closer. Somewhere in the darkness, the Alpha King was fighting his war, and whether I wanted to or not, I was already part of it. Chapter 4. The Alpha's Wound. The wind howled that night as if the forest itself mourned something unseen. The fire burned low, its light flickering against the walls like restless ghosts. I couldn't sleep. Not after what had happened. Not after watching the Alpha King kill to protect what was his. What I had protected first. Ash and Ember lay curled near the hearth, breathing softly, unaware of the blood that had stained their home hours ago. I'd buried the bodies of the rogues myself, far from the cabin, beneath a broken oak. The soil was hard, the ground frozen, but I dug anyway. My hands still burned from the effort. My soul ached worse. Every sound outside made me flinch. Every gust of wind reminded me of his voice. The way it had deepened when he said, "You've made me care again." That wasn't something a man like him should ever confess. It wasn't something I should ever remember. And yet, I did. Over and over. The forest had gone silent since his departure, like every living thing was waiting for his return. By the time dawn began to break, exhaustion finally pulled me under. I don't know how long I slept. only that I woke to the sound of thunder again. But this wasn't thunder. It was something heavier, slower, closer. Hoofbeats. I rushed to the window and peered through the crack in the curtain. A group of riders moved through the fog, cloaked in crimson. Not rogues, not soldiers. Assassins. The Luna's elite. My blood went cold. They dismounted not far from the clearing. One of them, a woman with white hair and eyes like glass, bent to the ground, sniffed the soil, then turned to the others. "She was here," she said. Her voice was sharp, cruel. And so were the pups. The others drew blades. I grabbed the pups and backed toward the hidden door in the floorboards, a small crawl space I'd carved months ago for supplies. It wasn't much, but it would hide them. "Down, Ash. Down, Ember," I whispered, pushing them gently through the opening. Their golden eyes shone in the dark. "Don't make a sound, no matter what you hear." They whined softly but obeyed, curling together in silence. I pulled. The trapdoor shut just as the first knock came, gentle, almost polite. Then another, louder. "Open the door, healer," a woman's voice sang. "We've come for what doesn't belong to you." I stood perfectly still. The knife I'd kept near the table gleamed in my hand again. My heart pounded so loud it felt like it filled the entire cabin. "Come now," she said sweetly. "The king is dying, and he sent us to fetch his little savior." My breath caught. Dying? The lie was clever, cruelly clever, because it struck where fear already lived. "I don't believe you," I said. "Leave now or you'll regret it." The woman's laughter was like ice breaking. "Oh, child, regret belongs to you. You should have let the pups freeze." A crash followed. The window shattered, glass spraying across the floor. Another kick hit the door. Wood cracked. I backed up, clutching the knife tighter. The first assassin came through the broken window, black leather, pale face, eyes burning with silver hate. I lunged before he could stand, slashing across his arm. He hissed, dropping his weapon. I kicked him backward into the wall and turned for the door, but it burst open, slamming against the frame. Two more entered. I was trapped. They circled me slowly, like wolves studying their prey. The woman who'd spoken stepped in behind them, smiling as if this were all a game. Her eyes shimmered unnaturally. Witch's eyes. "So this is the girl who stole the Alpha's fate," she said. "Not much to look at, but destiny has poor taste." "Where's your Luna?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Hiding behind her killers?" Her smile widened. "She doesn't hide. She commands." She raised her hand, and the air itself seemed to twist, a pulse of dark energy rippling toward me. I dove aside, feeling it burn past my shoulder and scorch the wall. The smell of smoke filled the room. "Witch," I hissed. "Smart girl." She took a step closer. "The Luna gave me a simple task. End the human who carries her shame." My knife trembled in my grip. "You'll have to try harder." The witch tilted her head. "Gladly." She flicked her wrist and a burst of power exploded against my chest, hurling me backward. I hit the floor hard, pain exploding through my ribs. The knife flew from my hand. Through the haze, I saw her raise her hand again, ready for another strike. Then the world exploded in sound. A howl, deep, furious, heart-shattering, tore through the forest. The witch froze. The assassins turned. The floor shook beneath us as the windows blew open from the pressure of power descending. And there he was. The Alpha King crashed through the doorway like a storm unchained, his cloak soaked in blood, his eyes burning gold and wild. One arm was slick with crimson, his shoulder torn open, but he didn't stop. He moved through the room like vengeance made flesh. The witch threw a bolt of energy at him, but it shattered harmlessly against his chest. He caught her by the throat before she could blink. "Touch what's mine again," he growled, "and you'll pray for the mercy your Luna never gave." Her eyes widened, the glow fading. Then, silence. Her body fell, lifeless, to the ground. The remaining assassins froze, trembling. The king turned toward them slowly, his voice a low growl. "Run." They did. And just like that, the cabin was quiet again, except for the sound of his breathing, heavy and uneven. I pushed myself up, pain stabbing my ribs. "You're hurt," I said. He turned toward me, blood dripping from his arm. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing," I said, stepping forward. "Sit down." "Lyria, sit down." He hesitated, then sank heavily into the nearest chair. His wound was deep, claw marks, raw and bleeding. The scent of iron filled the air. I grabbed the cloth from the table and pressed it to his shoulder. He didn't flinch, but his jaw clenched. "Who did this?" I asked. "Someone who used to swear loyalty," he said through gritted teeth. "The Luna's guards turned on me when they learned the pups still lived. So she knows." "Yes." His eyes darkened. "And she'll keep sending them until she has what she wants." I cleaned the wound as best I could, but the blood wouldn't stop. My fingers trembled. "You shouldn't have come here. You're bleeding out." He caught my wrist suddenly, his grip strong despite the pain. His eyes locked on mine, fierce, golden, trembling with something deeper than rage. "I came because I felt you calling me." My breath caught. "I didn't." "You did," he whispered. "Every heartbeat you've spent fearing for them." I heard it. He leaned closer, his voice raw and low. "Do you know what it means when an alpha feels another's fear like his own?" I shook my head, unable to speak. "It means you're bound," he said. "By blood, by spirit, by fate." The room fell silent except for the crackle of the dying fire. My pulse thundered in my ears. "I don't want your curse," I whispered. He smiled faintly. Neither did I. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The tension between us was heavy, alive. His blood soaked through the cloth, his breath harsh and unsteady, yet he looked at me as if I was the only thing keeping him upright. Then his voice broke the silence again, softer this time, almost human. "If I die, Lyria, the pack will tear itself apart. The Luna will crown herself again, and she will burn everything that carries my scent, including you." "You're not dying," I said fiercely. "Not while I can stop it." He smirked weakly. "You command your king now?" "I command whoever bleeds on my floor," I said. "And right now, that's you." For the first time, a rough, tired laugh escaped him. It wasn't the sound of power or wrath. It was relief, maybe even trust. I pressed harder against the wound until the bleeding slowed. He winced but didn't stop me. When I finally looked up, his gaze was already on me, steady, unblinking, burning with something that terrified me more than death ever could. "You saved my heirs," he murmured. "You faced my enemies. You stood between death and destiny without fear. Tell me, Lyria, what are you?" I swallowed hard. "Just someone who doesn't like seeing the innocent die." He leaned closer, his voice barely a whisper. "No. You're something else. You're the reason my curse started to break." And for a heartbeat, I thought he'd say more. But his head dropped suddenly, his body going limp. "Hey!" I caught him before he fell, panic surging through me. His pulse was weak, but still there. He was alive. Barely. I dragged him closer to the fire, my arms shaking under his weight. His blood stained the floor, his breathing shallow but steady. I cleaned the wound again and whispered into the quiet. Not to him, but to whatever force was listening. "You brought him to me," I said. "Now help me keep him alive." The fire flared higher, almost answering. Outside, thunder rolled again, far away this time, as if the storm had finally decided to wait. And in that moment, as the Alpha King lay bleeding on my floor, I realized something terrifying and true. The night he found me, I had saved his pups. Tonight, I had saved him. And somehow, fate was not done yet. Chapter 5. At the night he slept under my roof. The fire had burned down to embers by the time his breathing steadied. His blood stained the boards beneath us, dark, glistening, royal. The scent of iron and pine clung to the air, thick and unyielding. I had washed his wound 3 times, stitched what I could, and bound it with linen torn from my only blanket. He lay still now, his head resting against my lap. His face, even in pain, was carved with something inhumanly regal. The lines of command, of solitude, of centuries of control. Yet in that stillness, there was a flicker of something fragile. Humanity. Ash and Ember had crawled from their hiding space once the silence returned. They'd padded over to him quietly, as if they knew their father's scent was finally safe again. They curled beside him, one at his feet, the other by his hand. It was the gentlest sight I'd ever seen. The beast who had shattered men's bones breathing softly between his pups. I brushed a strand of hair from his face. "You shouldn't have come here," I whispered. "Not bleeding, not hunted, not when they all want your head." He didn't answer. Not with words. But his brow furrowed slightly, like even in unconsciousness he heard me, like some part of him always listened. Outside, rain began to fall. Soft at first, then steady, the rhythm of it against the roof calming and cold. I wrapped my shawl tighter around my shoulders, staring into the dying fire. My hands trembled from exhaustion, from fear, from something I couldn't name. I had faced death tonight. Again. And yet the thing that terrified me most lay sleeping in my lap. The Alpha King. Every time he breathed, the flames bent slightly toward him, as if the world itself bowed to his existence. There was power even in his stillness. I couldn't understand how someone like him could exist, half light, half storm, yet so human in his brokenness. I don't know when I drifted into sleep, only that when I woke, the fire had gone cold, and he was gone. My heart lurched. I rose quickly, my bare feet silent on the floor. The chair he'd sat in was empty, the bandages I'd tied stained with fresh blood. The pups were awake, whining softly near the door. I rushed outside. Dawn had barely touched the sky, painting the forest in shades of blue and silver. Mist curled through the trees like ghosts. I scanned the clearing. Nothing. Then I heard it, the low sound of breath, heavy and uneven. He was kneeling by the river, shirtless, washing his blood-stained hands. The water turned crimson around his fingers before vanishing downstream. His back was broad, muscles tense, the bandage I'd tied now soaked through. "You'll tear the stitches," I said, stepping closer. He didn't turn. "They've held worse. You're supposed to rest." "I don't rest," he murmured. "I heal," I frowned, walking to his side. "Healing requires stillness, not pride." He finally looked at me. His eyes, molten gold in the Wema, early light, held something I couldn't face for. Long. Gratitude. Guilt. Wonder. "You speak to me like I'm not a king," he said softly. "I speak to you like a man who'll die if he keeps pretending he's unbreakable," I replied. He almost smiled. Almost. "You're bold." "Lyria. Only when I'm tired." He turned back to the river, scooping another handful of cold water over his face. The droplets clung to his lashes, his hair falling across his forehead. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, different. My Luna once told me love was a crown. Beautiful, heavy, and meant to break the one who wears it. He paused, his gaze lost in the current. "She wasn't wrong." I stepped closer. "Why did she do it?" He stilled. The wind carried the silence between us like a wound reopening. "Because the bond we shared was never fated," he said at last. "It was arranged. Political. She was the daughter of the Silver Fang clan. Uniting her blood with mine was meant to end a century of war. But she hated me for what I was. She loved another." My chest tightened. "Then why keep her?" "Because I was king," he said simply. "And kings don't get to choose who they love. They only get to bear the cost of it." He lifted his eyes to mine, sharp, aching. "When she found out she was with child, she told me they weren't mine." I didn't believe her. I couldn't. But when the pups were born, she vanished. Took the royal crest. Left them to die where no one would find them. His jaw tightened. When I learned the truth, it was already too late. The pack was divided. Half believed her. Half followed me. So I did what kings do best. I pretended it didn't hurt. The river carried his reflection away. I knelt beside him, the cold water soaking my skirt. "And now?" He looked down at his hands, scarred, powerful, trembling slightly. "Now I can't pretend anymore. Not after you." My breath caught. "Me? You saved what she destroyed. You risked your life for something that wasn't yours. You gave them warmth when their blood gave them none. And now they look at you the way they once looked at her, but without fear." He turned his gaze to me, soft and burning all at once. "You remind me what it's like to be human, and that's more dangerous than any blade." The words hit deeper than I expected. "I didn't mean to." He gave a hollow laugh. "Neither did I." A long silence followed, the kind that stretched between souls rather than strangers. The sun rose higher, spilling light across the water. He stood wincing slightly as his wound pulled, then offered his hand to help me up. I hesitated, then took it. His touch was warm, steady, alive. "Come," he said. "The pups will wake soon." We walked back to the cabin together. Ash and Ember yipped when they saw him, tails wagging wildly. He knelt to greet them, letting them climb onto his knees. For a moment, he wasn't a king, or a monster, or a curse wrapped in flesh. He was just a father. Broken. Trying. Real. I watched the way his eyes softened when they licked his hand. The way he whispered to them in a language older than the wind. It was a side of him I hadn't known existed, and maybe he hadn't either. Then suddenly his expression changed. The softness drained. His eyes lifted toward the forest. His nostrils flared. "They're close," he said. My stomach twisted. "Who?" "The Luna's men. She'll stop at nothing now that she knows I live." He stood quickly, his presence filling the room like a storm reborn. "We need to move before they reach us." "Move? Where?" "To the ruins north of here. The old sanctuary. The one the moon priests abandoned centuries ago." I blinked. "That place is cursed," he met my gaze. "So am I." The air between us crackled. I wanted to argue, to tell him he needed to rest, but something in his tone silenced me. It wasn't command, it was concern. He turned toward the door. "Pack what you can. I'll handle the rest." "Handle what?" I asked. "The ones already watching us?" Before I could speak, he was gone, stepping into the forest, cloak swirling behind him, golden eyes vanishing into mist. The pups whimpered softly, sensing my fear. I knelt beside them. "He'll be back," I whispered, more to myself than to them. "He always comes back." But as the wind rose and the scent of blood drifted faintly through the air, I realized the truth. Every time the Alpha King came back, something in him broke a little more. And one day, maybe soon, it wouldn't just be his kingdom that paid the price. It would be me. Chapter 6. Hunted by the moon, the day bled into twilight before I saw him again. The forest had been restless for hours, branches snapping in the distance, birds fleeing the treetops, the silence that comes before something monstrous moves. I had packed what little I could, a pouch of herbs, dry bread, a flask of water. Ash and Ember sat by the door, restless, their golden eyes fixed on the tree line. They knew before I did. They always did. And then I smelled it. Blood and rain. The Alpha King staggered through the mist, his cloak torn, his hand pressed to his ribs. I rushed forward before I could think, catching him just as he collapsed against the door frame. "You said you'd handle them," I whispered, half in fear, half in anger. He looked down at me with a faint, grim smile. "I did." His breath came ragged. I could see the blood soaking through his shirt, the wound deep, clawed, still bleeding. My heart clenched as I helped him inside. The pups ran to him, whining, pressing against his legs. He sank into the chair by the fire, the same one where I'd saved him once before, and let his head fall back, closing his eyes. "They were waiting in the ravine," he said between shallow breaths. "The Luna's new assassins. Not rogues, wolves, my wolves. She's turned them against me." I tore the bandage from his shoulder and pressed it to his side. "You can't fight all of them alone." His eyes opened, glowing faintly gold in the firelight. "I wasn't alone. What do you mean?" "They weren't trying to kill me, Lyria. They were tracking you." My pulse stopped. "Me?" "She knows your scent now. The woman who saved her pups, the one who broke her curse. You've become her weakness. And mine." He said it so quietly that the words almost slipped past me. "But they're waiting." "She's declared war," he continued, voice rasping. "On me. On the pups. On you. Anyone who shelters us will burn. Anyone who speaks your name will be hunted." I swallowed hard. "So what happens now?" He looked at me for a long moment. 1,000 thoughts hidden behind those golden eyes. Then he whispered, "Now, we disappear." The wind howled outside, shaking the cabin walls. I tightened the bandage around his ribs, my hands trembling. He caught my wrist gently. "Don't be afraid," he said. "I'm not afraid," I lied. He smiled faintly. "You should be." Then his gaze darkened, distant, haunted. "When I was cursed, the moon goddess told me I would lose everything I ever tried to protect. My Luna, my family, my crown. She said the curse would only break when I loved something pure enough to destroy me." I froze. "And you think that's me?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence between us said it all. The fire crackled. Outside, thunder rumbled again. The forest seemed to bend with the weight of what hung in the air. "You can't stay here," I said at last. "The moment the sun rises, they'll track your scent." "I'll draw them away," he murmured. "You'll take the pups north to the ruins." "No." His eyes snapped open. "No? I'm not leaving you," I said firmly. "You bleed for them. You fight for them. You call this fate a curse. But you still choose it. You're not the only one who gets to choose. Alpha." For the first time, he looked startled, not by danger, but by defiance. "You don't understand what you're saying." "I do." I stepped closer, feeling his aura press against me like a living storm. "You said fate bound us. Then let it bind us all the way. If I die, it won't be hiding in some forest ruin. I'll die fighting beside you." His breath hitched. For a heartbeat, his eyes softened, flickered with something too human to belong to a king. "You're madness," he whispered. "And you're cursed," I said. "Maybe that's the same thing." He gave a low, tired laugh, the kind that sounds like surrender disguised as humor. Then his gaze hardened again. "If you stay, you obey me. Every word, every command," I nodded. "If it keeps them alive, yes." He leaned forward slightly, eyes burning into mine. "Then when I tell you to run, Lyria, you run." "Even if I don't," the words sliced through me. "Don't say that." "I have to," he said quietly, "because one of us has to live long enough to save them." The pups whimpered, sensing the heaviness between us. He reached down and touched their heads, his blood dripping onto their fur like a vow. "They will inherit more than my name," he murmured. "They will inherit the truth. That love, even cursed, is stronger than death." I turned away before the tears could fall. "You sound like a man preparing to die." He rose slowly, towering but unsteady, his hand still pressed to his side. "No," he said. "Just a man preparing to make it mean something." Before I could reply, the ground trembled. The air shifted. The pups stiffened, ears pricking up. Then I heard it. Distant howls. Dozens. Maybe more. "They found us," he said simply. The door rattled as if struck by invisible hands. The fire flickered blue, snuffed out. I could hear voices outside. Not human, not wolf, something between. the Luna's army. He turned to me, eyes blazing. Take the pups. I won't leave you. Do it, Lyria. His voice carried the weight of command, the kind that even the wind obeyed. But I didn't move. I just looked at him, bleeding, unbroken, magnificent, and shook my head. Then you'll fight with me, he said. I nodded once. Always, he smiled, a rare, fleeting, haunted smile. Then may the moon bear witness to our madness. He turned toward the door, shoulders straight, power surging around him like a storm reborn. The golden glow in his eyes intensified until the entire cabin shimmered with it. The air itself seemed to bow. Stay behind me, he said. And then, with one final breath, he opened the door. The night screamed. Shapes moved in the darkness. Wolves twisted by dark magic. Their eyes white, their howls echoing like broken souls. They lunged from the mist, but the Alpha King met them head-on. He was fury incarnate, claws slicing through shadow, his roar shaking the earth. I saw the moonlight wrap around him like armor, turning blood into flame. Every movement was both savage and divine. I fought too, not with claws, but with fire. I hurled burning logs, swung the iron poker, protected the pups when they tried to reach me. The air filled with screams, theirs, ours, the forest's. Then I saw her, the Luna. She stood beyond the clearing cloaked in white, her hair like silver snow. Her eyes glowed the same gold as his, but colder, crueler. Raven, she called, his name like venom. You can't save them. The moon has already chosen her grave. The Alpha King turned, blood on his lips, fire in his eyes. Then I'll burn her moon to ashes before I'd let you touch her. Their powers collided, light and shadow, love and fury. The forest split with the force of it. Trees fell. The earth cracked. I screamed his name, but he didn't hear me. The last thing I remember before the explosion of light was his voice. Low, raw, breaking through the chaos. Run, Lyria. For them. Then everything went white. Chapter 7. The Silence After Fire. When I opened my eyes, the world was smoke. Ash drifted through the air like slow snow, falling on blackened earth. The smell of fire and blood clung to everything. The sky had no color, just gray, heavy and endless. I tried to move, but pain tore through my body. My hands were scraped, my head pounding. The last thing I remembered was his voice. Run, Lyria. For them. And then the light swallowing everything. Raven, I whispered, my throat raw. There was no answer. Only the crackle of dying fire and the faint whimper of the pups. Ash and Ember were alive. Somehow. They lay curled near a half-burned log, trembling but unharmed. Relief hit me so hard I almost cried. I crawled toward them, gathering them into my arms. Their fur was singed, their tiny hearts racing. You're safe, I whispered. You're safe, my loves. But I couldn't feel him. The forest was dead quiet. No heartbeat, no presence, no golden glow. The bond that had burned like a thread between us felt cold now, snapped or sleeping. No, I breathed. You can't be gone. I rose unsteadily, clutching the pups close, and stumbled through the wreckage. Trees lay split in half, roots torn from the ground. The cabin was gone, burned to its bones. Smoke curled from the ashes like ghosts rising to heaven. Raven, I called, my voice cracked. Answer me. Nothing. I pushed deeper into the ruins of the clearing, my bare feet cutting on shards of glass and stone. The silence pressed in like a weight. My heart refused to believe what my eyes couldn't see. He couldn't be gone. He couldn't. And then, a sound. Faint. Hoarse. A groan. I froze, turning toward it. It came from the edge of the river. That same river where he'd once knelt to wash away his sins. I ran, tripping, slipping in the mud until I saw him. He lay half in the water, half on the shore, his cloak torn, his chest rising unevenly. The glow in his eyes was gone, replaced by the pale emptiness of exhaustion. But he was alive. I fell to my knees beside him. Raven, His hand moved weakly, reaching for me. "Lyria," his voice was rough, fading. "You didn't run." "Neither did you," I whispered, tears streaking my face. He gave a faint, broken laugh that ended in a cough. Blood stained his lips, still defying me, even when it kills you. "You're not dying," I said fiercely, pressing my hands to his chest. "Not while I can stop it." He looked up at me, eyes dim but still burning somewhere deep inside. "You can't stop fate, little healer." "I can try." I tore a strip of fabric from what remained of my dress and pressed it to the wound on his side. The blood was dark, thick, spilling too fast. My hands were shaking. "You should have left," he whispered. "You were never meant to be part of this curse." "I was never meant to watch you die either," I said, voice breaking. "But here I am." He reached up, fingers brushing my cheek, leaving a streak of red on my skin. "You sound angry." "I am," I said, choking back a sob. "Because every time I save you, you try to leave me with ghosts." His thumb traced the edge of my jaw. "You make me feel mortal again. Then live," I begged. "Live for them." The pups whimpered softly beside me, pressing against his arm. He turned his head slightly to look at them, the faintest smile ghosting his lips. "They'll need you," he murmured. "When I'm gone, don't say it," I snapped. "Don't you dare," he blinked slowly, stubborn as ever. "Alive as ever," I said, holding his gaze. "You're not dying here. Not like this, not where I found your children." For a moment, the wind fell still. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then, somewhere deep in the forest, the faint glow of moonlight shimmered through the smoke, silver and soft. I felt it, the pulse of something ancient, watching, waiting. The same divine force that had cursed him was here, listening. I lifted my face toward the light. "If you can hear me," I whispered, "you gave him this curse. You broke him, but I found him. I saved him. If this is fate, change it." The light grew brighter, blinding. The pups howled softly, and then just as quickly it dimmed, settling over his body like a veil. His breathing steadied. The bleeding slowed. His eyes fluttered open, faint gold returning like sunrise through storm clouds. "What did you do?" He rasped. "I don't know," I said, tears spilling freely. Maybe the goddess finally listened. He stared at me, something like awe in his expression. "Or maybe she's just afraid of you." I let out a shaky laugh. "She should be." He tried to sit up, groaning, but I pushed him back down. "Don't move. You'll tear it open again." He sighed, letting his head rest against my lap once more, the same way he had that first night. "You keep saving me," he murmured. "You'll make me weak." "Maybe weakness is what keeps you alive." He chuckled lowly, a sound that melted something inside me. Then his voice softened. "The Luna's gone," I blinked. "Gone?" She fled. When the light broke, her wolves scattered. Her bond to the curse shattered when mine did. She won't stop hunting, but she's no queen anymore. My heart clenched with relief and dread all at once. And the pack? They'll come for me soon. Some to follow, some to finish what she started. "Then we'll be ready," I said firmly. "Together." He looked up at me, that faint smile returning. Tired, gentle, real. "You still think you're part of this?" "I know I am." The silence that followed was soft, almost sacred. The fire in the distance had died completely now. The forest was blackened, but alive. The moonlight bathed the riverbank in silver. He reached for my hand and held it, strong despite the tremor. "You're not my curse anymore, Lyria," he said quietly. "You're my redemption." I felt the world pause, just for that moment. The river murmured. The wind sighed. The pups pressed against us, warm and safe. He closed his eyes, finally letting himself rest, his hand still gripping mine. And for the first time since I'd met him, the Alpha King looked at peace. I sat there through the night, watching the stars fade behind the dawn, guarding him as he had guarded me. The forest around us was ruined, but something new had begun to breathe beneath the ashes. When the first rays of sunlight touched his face, I whispered to the morning. He's alive. We all are. The pups stirred, stretching, yawning. The river carried the blood away. For now, just for this fragile, trembling moment, the curse was quiet. And the bond between us burned brighter than ever. Chapter 8. The King Who Rose from Ashes. The next morning dawned pale and quiet, like the world was too afraid to breathe. The river had carried away the blood, leaving only the whisper of water and the scent of smoke. The forest, once wild with screams, now lay broken and still, trees torn, earth scarred, but alive enough to remember what happened. He stirred before the sun had fully lifted. The Alpha King, Raven. His eyes fluttered open slowly, their gold dim but alive. The faint breeze stirred his dark hair as he blinked at the gray sky. For a heartbeat, he looked lost, not as a ruler, not as a warrior, but as a man waking from a long nightmare. Then his gaze found me. "Lyria," he whispered. His voice rasped fragile. I moved closer, pressing my hand against his chest. "You're safe," I said softly. "You made it." He stared at me for a long moment, like he didn't believe it. Then, slowly, he sat up, his movements heavy but sure. The bandage on his ribs was stained but dry. The wound had closed faster than nature allowed. "The moon," he murmured, glancing up at the pale sky. "It feels different." I followed his gaze. The light that filtered through the clouds wasn't the usual cold silver. It shimmered faintly gold, a color I had only ever seen in his eyes. "The curse," I said quietly. "It's changing." He nodded slowly, then flexed his hand. Sparks of faint golden light traced along his fingers, not burning, not wild, steady, calm, as if the power itself had bowed to him. For the first time since I'd met him, he didn't look like a creature bound by pain. He looked like the storm had finally recognized its master. Ash and Ember yipped near the riverbank, chasing the ripples. Their laughter, that tiny sound, filled the silence with life. The king watched them, and a small, quiet smile touched his lips. "They're stronger," he said softly. "They were born into betrayal, and yet they still play." "They learned from you," I said. His smile faded, replaced by something deeper, sadder. "No, they learned from you." He rose slowly, testing his balance. His strength had returned, but something else had come with it. The air around him shimmered faintly, a quiet pulse that I could feel rather than see. "What is this?" I asked. He looked down at his hands again, flexing them as golden dust rose and vanished. "When the Luna's power broke, it didn't leave me. It changed me. I'm not just Alpha anymore, Lyria. I am what the curse made, and what your faith remade." He turned toward me, his gaze sharp, burning, yet softer than ever. Half man, half storm, no longer bound to the moon, free, but feared. I felt a chill. "Then the pack, they'll come," he said. "They always do. Some will kneel, others will want my head, but they'll know what I've become." He took a slow breath and looked back toward the river, his voice low. "They'll call it rebirth, but it feels like a reckoning." I stepped closer, feeling the strange heat radiate from him. Wild, ancient, alive. "What will you do now?" He turned to me fully, eyes gleaming brighter than the sun breaking through the clouds. "What I should have done long ago. Take back what was mine, not with wrath, but with truth. You want to face them?" I asked, my voice trembling. "After all they've done?" He smiled faintly. "They followed a queen who ruled with fear. Let them see a king who fights for more than blood. And if they reject you, then I'll burn alone," he said simply. "But I won't hide again." The pups barked as if agreeing. I looked at them, then back at him. The fire in his voice scared me, not because it was violent, but because it was honest. "Let me go with you," I said. He froze. "No? Yes. Lyria, I saved your pups. I saved you. I've already bled for your cause. Don't tell me I can't walk beside you now." His jaw clenched. "If you follow me, they'll call you a witch, a curse. They'll hunt you until the day you die." I met his gaze, steady. "Then they'll have to catch me first." A long silence stretched between us. The only sound was the river and the faint sigh of the morning wind, Then, slowly, he stepped closer. The sunlight caught his face, the faint scars, the exhaustion, the new light that lived beneath his skin. "You don't fear death," he said softly. "I fear losing what I love," I answered. His eyes darkened, the gold deepening into something molten. "You shouldn't say that," he whispered. "Not to a man who's still half curse." "I don't care what you are," I said. "You're alive. That's enough." He closed his eyes briefly, exhaling as if the words themselves were dangerous. When he opened them again, the storm inside had calmed. But only just. "Then stay close," he said finally. "When the pack sees you, they'll see me. And when they see me, they'll know what happens to those who betray their king." He turned toward the horizon, toward the distant hills where the remnants of his pack waited. His cloak fluttered in the breeze, edges burned and torn, but still regal. "Raven," I said softly. He looked back. "Do you ever wonder," I asked, "if this was meant to be? You finding me, the pups, the curse breaking?" He smiled faintly. "If it wasn't meant to be," he said, "then the gods are worse liars than I thought." He started walking, his shadow long against the scorched ground. I followed, the pups trotting between us, their tiny paws leaving prints in the ash. Every step felt heavier, but the air felt cleaner, like something old had finally ended. The fire had taken our home, but not our hope. As we climbed the ridge, the wind shifted, carrying with it a sound. Distant howls. Dozens of them, some mournful, some defiant, all waiting. The Alpha King stopped at the crest of the hill, the sun cutting through the clouds to bathe him in gold. His aura flared, silent, immense, unbroken. "They're calling," I whispered. He nodded once. "Then let them come." He looked down at the pups, then at me, and for the first time, his voice carried not command, but promise. "Whatever comes next," he said, "you'll stand beside a king reborn, and a man finally unchained." And as the wind rose and the howls echoed across the valley, I realized something I hadn't before. The curse hadn't just changed him. It had changed us, from savior and beast, to something the moon itself could no longer define. Chapter 9. The Ruins and the Oath. The road to the stronghold was nothing but stone and ghosts. The forest thinned as we moved north, giving way to jagged cliffs and the scent of old battlefields, earth still heavy with the memory of blood. The sky stretched wide and gray above us, clouds dragging their shadows across the mountains. Raven walked ahead, silent, every movement deliberate. His wounds had healed, but I could still see the weight in his shoulders, not pain, but thought. The kind of thought that burrows deep and never lets go. Ash and Ember followed between us, darting through the mist, their small paws echoing against the cracked stones. They didn't seem to understand the danger waiting ahead, or maybe they did, and simply trusted him more than fear itself. When we finally saw it, my breath caught. The stronghold wasn't just a castle. It was a wound carved into the mountainside. Black towers rose like broken fangs, their banners torn, the gates half shattered. The great bridge leading to the entrance had fallen away in parts, leaving only jagged stone and a dizzying drop beneath. "This was your home?" I asked quietly. He stopped at the edge of the ravine. "It was," he said, "before the curse made it a prison." His eyes swept over the ruins with something between longing and hate. The wind tugged at his cloak, the gold light beneath his skin flickering faintly in the gloom. I stepped closer, my voice soft. "Then maybe it's time to make it something else." He looked at me, and for a moment, the hardness in his face cracked. "You don't know what it takes to rebuild a kingdom, Lyria?" "Then teach me," I said. "You said I'm part of this now. Let me carry some of it." His jaw tightened. "The last person I shared my crown with betrayed me. I'm not her." He studied me in silence, the wind curling around us. Then quietly he said, "I know." We crossed the ruined bridge, one careful step at a time. The pups whined, their claws scraping stone. but Raven lifted them both and carried them across. When we finally reached the other side, the great gates loomed before us, tall, ancient, carved with the sigil of his line. A wolf's head surrounded by a crescent moon. The metal was rusted, the edges clawed as if torn by his own kind. "Do they know you're coming?" I asked. He gave a faint, humorless smile. "They will." He placed his hand on the gate. For a moment, nothing happened. Then light spread from his palm, gold bleeding into the black iron, tracing every line of the sigil. The air trembled. With a groan like the earth itself waking, the gates opened. The courtyard beyond was filled with silence. Broken statues, shattered glass, remnants of banners that once carried his crest. And then, movement. Dozens of eyes glowed in the shadows. Wolves, men, women, soldiers. Some bowed. Some bared their teeth. "Alpha," one of them growled, stepping forward. His face was scarred, his armor dented. "You shouldn't have come back." Raven's voice was calm. "And yet I did." "The Luna said you were dead," the soldier spat. "She said the curse consumed you, that your power belonged to her now." "Then she lied," Raven said simply. He stepped into the courtyard, his presence flooding the space like a storm breaking through the clouds. The soldiers shifted uneasily as that familiar authority washed over them, the kind no throne or crown could grant. "I am still your king," he said. "And I am still the blood you swore to serve." A murmur rippled through the crowd, half awe, half fear. Some dropped to one knee immediately. Others stayed standing, their loyalty fractured, but not yet gone. Then a voice rose from the back. "Where is she?" The crowd parted, and a tall man stepped forward, his hair silver, his eyes like steel. "The Beta, the one who had first come to my cabin." "Beta Kyle," Raven said. "Your Majesty," the man replied, bowing his head. "You live, barely," Raven said. "But I'm done hiding. The Luna's reign ends today." Kale's gaze flicked to me then, his expression tightening. "And the woman?" Raven's voice dropped lower. "She's under my protection." A ripple of shock moved through the wolves. Some whispered, others snarled quietly. Kale's brow furrowed. "You bring a human into sacred ground?" "She saved my heirs," Raven said, his voice cutting like steel. "She saved me. Her blood may be human, but her courage shamed every wolf who turned his back." Kale hesitated, then lowered his gaze. "Then I'll trust your judgment, Alpha," Raven nodded once. "Prepare the court. At dawn, I will claim what's mine." He turned to me then, his eyes softening just enough for me to breathe again. "Stay close. They'll test you before they trust you." "I can handle tests," I said. He gave a faint smile. "You've handled worse." As he walked past me toward the throne hall, I felt the weight of the moment settle around us. The air was heavy with history, with ghosts of betrayal and war. The wolves watched me, some with curiosity, others with open disdain. But none dared approach while he was near. The pups padded behind him, tiny steps echoing in the vast silence of the hall. Their golden eyes mirrored his, proof that hope still lived in a place built on ruin. Inside, the throne sat upon a dais of black marble, cracked, empty, waiting. He stood before it for a long time, his hands resting on the armrests, his reflection faint in the fractured stone. "When I sat here last," he said quietly, "I thought I ruled the world, but I was already losing it." I stepped closer. "Maybe that throne doesn't need a ruler," I said softly. "Maybe it needs a savior." He looked at me, and the faintest hint of warmth touched his eyes. "And you think that's me?" "I think that's us." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us carried everything we'd endured. The blood, the fire, the loss, and the strange, impossible bond that refused to die. Then he sank slowly into the throne. The light from the high windows broke across his face, gold and shadow mingling as one. He didn't look like the man who had once cursed the moon, or the beast who had torn rogues apart. He looked like something new, the Alpha reborn. The wolves in the hall bowed as one. The sound echoed like thunder through the broken stronghold. Raven turned to me, his voice quiet but unshakable. "This place has forgotten mercy," he said. "Let's remind them what it looks like." I nodded, stepping to his side. "Then we begin with the truth." He leaned back in the throne, his gaze sweeping the hall, not with pride, but with purpose. "At dawn," he murmured, "the Luna will come for her crown. And when she does," he looked at me, his golden eyes alive with the fire of destiny reborn. "She'll learn that even curses bow to those who love without fear." And as the first light of dawn crept through the cracks in the walls, I knew the war wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Chapter 10. The return of the false Queen Dawn broke over the stronghold like a wound reopening. Pale light bleeding across the black towers, the air heavy with tension and old ghosts. The courtyard below the throne hall was filled with wolves, warriors, elders, sentinels, all waiting. No one spoke. Even the wind dared not stir. Raven sat upon his throne, tall, silent, every inch the king he was born to be. The faint golden light beneath his skin pulsed with every breath, a reminder that the curse was broken, or reborn into something stronger. His crown, forged from silver and stormstone, rested untouched on the armrest beside him. He didn't need it to look like royalty. I stood beside him, my heart pounding hard enough to feel in my throat. The pups sat near my feet, restless, sensing the danger that drew closer with each heartbeat. Then, from beyond the gates, a horn blew, low and haunting. The sound rolled through the mountains like thunder. The wolves in the courtyard stirred, unease rippling through them. "She's here," Kale murmured. The gates opened. She entered like a specter wrapped in snow. The Luna. Her cloak was pure white, her hair silver, flowing down her shoulders like frost. Her eyes glowed a cruel, unnatural gold, the same shade as Raven's once was, but colder, emptier. She walked with 24 wolves at her back, each one marked with her sigil, each one carrying the scent of death. When she reached the center of the courtyard, she smiled. My, she said softly. The rumors were true. The dead king still breathes. Raven rose slowly from the throne. The crowd fell silent. His voice, when it came, was calm, steady as the ground before an earthquake. "I told you once," he said, "that betrayal would be the last crown you ever wore." She laughed, a sound sharp enough to cut glass. "And yet here I am wearing it still."
"The wolves follow me now, Raven, not because of blood."
"Because they know what you've become." "I became what your lies made me," he said, his tone deepening. "I became the curse you carved into my name." She took a step forward, her eyes gleaming with mock pity. "Oh, I didn't make you this way. I simply showed the world what you really were. A king who lost control. A beast who couldn't save his own." He didn't move, but the air around him thickened, his aura spreading like heat from a rising sun. "And you?" he asked. "You left our heirs to die. You stained the moon with their blood. Tell me, Luna, what does that make you?" She smiled again, not with guilt, but with satisfaction. "A survivor." I felt rage burn through me before I realized I'd spoken. "You call murder survival?" Her gaze snapped to me, eyes narrowing. "And you must be the little human who thinks she can stand beside wolves." "I don't stand beside wolves," I said. "I stand beside the man who became one to protect them." Her lips curled. "Careful, girl. That tone could cost you your tongue." "Then come and take it," I said, my voice shaking, but my heart steady. The Luna's expression darkened. "You speak boldly for someone who wasn't invited into our curse." "Your curse ended the moment he chose love over fear," I said, stepping forward. "And now it's your turn to face what you've built." A murmur rippled through the pack. Some wolves lowered their heads. Others growled softly. Even they could feel it, the shift in power, the balance tilting. The Luna's voice sharpened. "You think you can take this from me?" "I am the moon's chosen." Raven's growl rolled through the hall like thunder. "No, you were." He stepped down from the dais, the ground trembling beneath his boots. His golden eyes flared, the mark of the moon on his wrist burning bright. The goddess gave us both the same gift, power. But only one of us remembered it was meant to protect, not destroy. She snarled. You think you can defeat me? You forget, my love. I gave you your power. He smiled. Slow, dangerous. Then watch what happens when I take it back. The air cracked. Golden light burst from him, slamming into the courtyard like a wave of fire. The Luna raised her hands, silver energy spiraling outward to meet his. The two forces collided, light and frost, love and hate. The world shuddered under the weight of it. Wolves scattered. The ground split. The sky dimmed. Raven's roar shook the heavens. For every lie you spoke. Her scream cut through his words. For every vow you broke. Lightning tore between them. The golden flames of his power swallowed the silver frost of hers, clashing in violent bursts that lit the ruined stronghold brighter than dawn. I could barely stand. The energy was too much, burning the air itself. The pups whimpered and pressed against my legs, their tiny bodies trembling. I shielded them with my arms, shouting through the chaos. Raven! You'll kill yourself. His eyes found mine, wild, blazing, divine. Not if it saves you. And then he unleashed it. A final surge, golden and blinding, erupted from his chest, spreading outward in a great wave that struck the Luna full in the heart. Her scream shattered through the valley, sharp and echoing, before it faded into silence. When the light finally dimmed, she was on her knees, her cloak torn, her eyes dull, the fire gone. Raven staggered forward, his strength draining, his skin still glowing faintly. He looked down at her, breathing hard. It's over, he said softly. The pack is free. She looked up at him, a strange sadness in her fading eyes. And what will you be now, Raven? Without your curse? He didn't answer. He only turned away. Her body dissolved into silver dust, carried off by the wind, like the last whisper of winter leaving the world. The silence that followed was deep and sacred. The wolves bowed their heads one by one. Even the air seemed to kneel. Raven turned to me slowly. His eyes were dim but warm, no longer burning, no longer cursed. It's done, he whispered. I ran to him, catching him before he could fall. His hand found mine, trembling. You did it, I said, my voice breaking. You're free, he smiled faintly. We're free. Kyle approached, his head bowed. My king, he said softly. Your throne is yours again. Raven looked at him, then at the gathered wolves. No, he said, his voice quiet but steady. It's ours. This kingdom will no longer serve fear, only unity. He turned to me. And her, the wolves murmured, stunned. He continued, she saved your heirs, your king, and your kind. From this day forward, her name is to be protected as you would protect your alpha. Kale nodded deeply. As you command. Raven looked at me, his expression softening. You wanted to stand beside me, he said quietly. Now you do, not as a savior, as my equal. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, tears burning behind my eyes. The pups barked, breaking the silence, their tiny voices rising through the smoky air. For the first time in forever, the sound made Raven laugh. Not bitter, not haunted, but real. The pack lifted their heads, howling to the sky, a chorus of freedom, of endings, of beginnings. And as I stood there beside him, the gold light of dawn washing over us, I realized that fate hadn't cursed me the night I saved those pups. It had chosen me, chosen us. The Alpha King reborn, the woman who defied destiny, and two tiny wolves who carried the proof that love could rise even from ashes. The curse was over, but our story, our legacy, had only just begun. Chapter 11. The Kingdom That Breathed Again. Days passed, but time itself felt different now. The air no longer carried the heaviness of curses or blood. It carried something new, something alive. Hope. The stronghold, once cloaked in shadows, began to stir again. Fires burned in the great halls. Wolves roamed the courtyards not as soldiers but as family. The ruins no longer whispered of betrayal. They hummed with rebuilding. Stones were lifted, walls repaired, laughter echoing faintly where screams once lived. The Alpha King's reign had returned, but it was not the same as before. He no longer ruled with fear. He ruled with silence, with presence, with the kind of strength that didn't have to roar to be known. Every morning, I would wake to find him standing on the terrace, his cloak brushing the cold stone, his golden eyes fixed on the horizon. The pups would tumble around his feet, chasing each other, their soft yips echoing through the mountains. He never spoke during those moments, but his stillness said everything, that he had found peace, however fragile, and he was learning how to hold it. One morning, I stepped up beside him. The air was cool, the sky streaked in gold and crimson. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" I asked. He didn't look at me, but I saw the faint curve of a smile. "Every day, and what do you see?" He turned his gaze toward the mountains, where fog coiled like silver smoke. A kingdom learning to breathe again. Wolves learning to be more than weapons. Children who won't grow up fearing the moon. "And you?" I whispered. He paused, his voice softer now. "A man who's still learning how to live without chains." I smiled faintly. "You're doing better than you think." He looked at me then, his eyes catching the sunrise. "You make it easier." My heart skipped, as it always did when he looked at me that way. Not as a king. Not as a beast, but as something caught between both. Something real. He reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from my face. "You still don't bow," he murmured. "I told you," I said, smiling. "I stand beside you." He laughed softly, shaking his head. And somehow, that frightens me more than any enemy ever did. Before I could answer, Kale approached from the courtyard below, his armor gleaming. "Majesty," he called. "The council is assembled," Raven nodded. "I'll be there shortly." When Kyle left, he exhaled slowly and looked at me again. "Come with me." "To the council?" He nodded. "They must see who saved them. Not as rumor, but as truth." We walked together through the halls, the pups trailing behind like tiny shadows. The wolves who passed bowed their heads, some in respect, others in curiosity. A few still whispered, wary of the human at their king's side, but none dared question his choice. The council chamber was vast, a circular hall of black stone, torches burning low along the walls. Elders sat in a semicircle, their faces aged, scarred, watchful. Kale stood to the right of the dais. When Raven entered, the room fell silent. He didn't speak immediately. He let the silence work, the way only he could. Then, when every eye was on him, he said simply, "The Luna is gone. Her reign of fear has ended." But the curse she spread was not just magic. It was memory, distrust, division. It lives in all of us still. And if we let it stay, it will destroy us from within. The elders exchanged glances. Murmuring quietly, Raven continued, "We will rebuild, not as wolves and humans, not as bloodlines and ranks, but as one pack. Those who follow the old ways will resist this. Let them. We will outlive them." An elder with silver eyes spoke up. "And the human Alpha? Will she sit among us?" Raven turned toward me, his voice firm. "She already stands beside me." The elder frowned. "A wolf's council is no place for—" "Enough!" Raven's tone dropped low, dangerous. The room stilled instantly. "She risked everything to save your future. Your children breathe because of her. You owe her your loyalty, or your silence." No one spoke after that. He stepped down from the dais and offered me his hand. "Tell them what you see." I froze. "Me?" "They've heard my voice for years," he said softly. "Let them hear yours." My heart hammered, but I stepped forward. Every gaze in the room pressed against me, sharp and heavy. I took a breath. "I'm not a queen," I said. "I'm not even one of you, but I know what it means to lose everything, and I know what it means to choose to build again anyway. The Alpha you follow. He's not the same man who sat on this throne before. He's stronger because he's learned mercy. You don't have to fear him anymore. You can stand with him." The silence that followed stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then Kyle stepped forward, bowed low, and said, Then we stand. One by one, the others followed. The sound of armor and claws hitting stone echoed through the hall like thunder. Raven looked at me, pride flickering in his eyes. When the council was dismissed, we lingered in the quiet that followed. The firelight painted his face in shades of gold and amber. "You spoke like a queen," he said. I shook my head. "No, just someone who believes in you." He stepped closer. "That's more dangerous." His hand brushed mine, a small silent promise in the space between us. "You've given me something the moon never did. What's that?" He smiled, soft, tired, real. "A reason to stay." The pups barked, tumbling across the stone, chasing each other again. He watched them, then glanced back at me. "They're growing faster than I thought." "They're your heirs," I said. "You shouldn't be surprised." He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "They'll inherit more than my name. They'll inherit this peace." The word lingered in the air like a prayer. Peace. Something neither of us had ever truly known. Until now. And yet, as I looked toward the distant mountains, the wind carried a sound I couldn't name. A whisper, low and cold. Something older than curses, older than the moon itself. It made my skin prickle. "Raven," I said softly, "do you hear that?" He turned toward the window, his expression darkening. "Yes." The gold in his eyes flickered, dimmed for a heartbeat, as if the light itself hesitated. "It's nothing," he said after a moment, though his voice was tense. "Just the wind." But I knew better, because deep in the northern shadows, beyond the reach of his kingdom's borders, something stirred. Something that had been waiting for the... Chapter 12. The shadow that waited the night the whispers began. The moon hung low and blood-pale above the rebuilt walls. The air was still, too still, the kind of silence that makes every flame flicker and every heart remember fear. I couldn't sleep. The pups had drifted off in their blanket near the hearth, but the unease in the air wouldn't let me rest. Something moved beyond the windows. Not wind, not wolf. Older. Deeper. Raven stood on the balcony, his cloak pulled tight against the cold. The gold in his eyes was dimmer tonight, as if the light itself had grown wary. "Tell me you don't feel it," I said, stepping beside him. He didn't answer immediately. Then, quietly, "I feel it. I just hoped you wouldn't." The wind shifted. Somewhere far to the north, thunder rumbled without lightning. "What is it?" I asked. He looked toward the mountains, jagged silhouettes clawing at the sky. "Something I thought died with the curse." I frowned. "The Luna?" He shook his head slowly. "Worse. The one who gave her the power to curse me in the first place." My breath caught. "You mean the goddess?" "No." His voice dropped to a whisper that carried the weight of centuries. "The one even the goddess fears. The first Alpha." The words hung between us like frost. "She was the beginning," he continued. "Before thrones, before pacts, before the moon learned how to choose her children. They say her heart was torn out by her own sons, but her shadow never left the world. The curse she created was her way of finding a vessel strong enough to carry her rage. And she chose you," I whispered. He nodded once. "But when I broke the curse, I also broke the seal that kept her sleeping." A chill crawled down my spine. "Then she's awake." "Yes." The wind rose, howling through the towers, carrying a faint sound with it. A voice, distant and broken, like the echo of something buried too long. "Raven." He stiffened. "She knows my name." "What does she want?" His jaw clenched. "Me. My blood. My throne. Everything I've reclaimed." He turned toward me, his eyes fierce again. "And if she can't take it from me, She'll come for you. I swallowed hard, stepping closer. Then she'll have to go through both of us. A small smile ghosted his lips, weary but proud. You'd defy a god for me? I'd defy the heavens themselves, I said. He reached out, brushing his hand against my cheek. Then whatever happens, you'll never face her alone. Thunder rolled again. Louder this time. The torches flickered. In the distance, I saw movement along the ridge, shadows rising where no light touched. Wolves, but not alive. Their eyes glowed faint silver, their bodies made of mist and ash. Raven's voice dropped low. The First's army, the dead who remember loyalty only to her. Cale burst into the hall behind us, panting. Majesty, the sentries report movement at the northern wall. Hundreds of them. Raven turned sharply. Sound the alarm. Get every able wolf to the gate. No one leaves the fortress. Cale bowed and vanished. Raven looked back at me. Stay inside. No. Lyria. I said no. I cut him off, grabbing the dagger from the table. I won't hide again. For a moment, his eyes burned with something between fury and fear. But then quietly, he nodded. Then we fight together. The bells began to toll. The fortress erupted in movement, armor clattering, howls rising into the storm. The night turned alive with fire and thunder. We ran through the corridors, the pups darting close behind, refusing to be left. When we reached the battlements, the sight that met us stole my breath. A sea of shadows stretched across the valley, spectral wolves, their howls echoing like the voices of the damned. Above them, hovering like a storm cloud given shape, was a figure. Tall, robed in darkness, eyes like two moons, the First. Her voice rolled over the walls, cold and eternal. So this is the king who dares defy my curse. Raven raised his head, golden light igniting in his hands. This kingdom no longer answers to shadows. Then it will die with you, she hissed. The battle began in a flash of lightning and flame. The shadow wolves surged forward, crashing against the fortress gates like a tide. The walls shook. Wolves leapt down from the towers, claws flashing, fangs tearing through smoke. The air filled with the sounds of battle, roars, screams, thunder. Raven's power exploded around him, gold fire meeting silver mist, every strike blinding. He was everywhere at once, a storm given flesh. But for every shadow he burned, two more rose. I fought beside him, the dagger burning with light he had once gifted me, cutting through the ghostly forms. The pups stayed near, growling, glowing, faintly with the same power that lived in their father's blood. Then the First spoke again, her voice shaking the mountains. You cannot kill what began the killing. She reached out a hand, and the air turned cold. Chains of silver light shot toward Raven, wrapping around him, dragging him to his knees. Raven! I screamed, running forward. He strained against them, the light burning into his skin. Lyria, stay back. I didn't listen. I threw myself between him and the First's gaze, raising the dagger. You want him? You'll have to take me first. The First laughed, a sound that cracked the sky. A mortal dares stand before me? I felt her power crash into me, cold, ancient, endless. Pain seared through my veins, but I didn't fall. I pressed forward, the dagger glowing brighter, fueled by something deeper than magic, by love, by defiance, by every heartbeat that had refused to stop. Raven's voice broke through the roar. Lyria, your heart, the bond, use it. And I understood. The bond we shared, the same force that had broken his curse, was still alive, pulsing between us. I reached for it, letting it burn through me, not as pain, but as light. The dagger burst into flame, golden and pure. I screamed, driving it forward, the blade sinking into the First's shadowed chest. Her scream split the night, echoing across the mountains. The chains shattered. Raven rose behind me, his power joining mine. Together, gold and human light fused, one final strike that tore through darkness itself. The first dissolved, her form unraveling into mist, her voice fading into a whisper. You cannot end what you are becoming. And then she was gone. Silence fell. The shadow wolves vanished. The storm broke. I dropped the dagger, my knees hitting the stone. Raven caught me before I fell. His arms were warm, solid, alive. It's over, I whispered, my voice shaking. He looked down at me, his eyes bright with awe and something else. Something deeper. No, it's just beginning. The dawn broke over us, crimson and gold spilling across the battlefield. The fortress stood. The pack survived. The shadow was gone. The curse that began with blood had ended with love. He pulled me close, his voice rough against my hair. Whatever comes next, we face it together. I nodded, my heart steady at last. Together. Always. And as the sun climbed higher, burning away the last of the mist, the new kingdom of wolves and humans